When I look at the AFC North and I look back at last weekend's NFL draft, to me, it epitomized the difference between teams that get how the draft works, that just flat out get it and understand how the game is played, and the organizations that don't get it, that continue to repeat their mistakes, continue to not learn from their past, and will continue to be picking in the same spot that they do every year, yet never can figure out why, even though they repeatedly make the same dumb decisions. To me, there were 3 teams in the AFC North that really helped themselves, and there was 1 team in the AFC North that is the Cleveland Browns, frankly. For years, Ozzie Newsome has been viewed as one of the best general managers in the game of football, and he's earned that right. And in large reason for earning that right is because of his organization's performance in the NFL draft over the years. From the Ray Lewises and the Jonathan Ogdens to the Ed Reeds, the Todd Heaps. I could go on and on and on. But you look at the Super Bowl champions from the 2012 season. You look at being able in the 2008 draft to be able to get both your franchise quarterback Joe Flacco in the first round and your star running back Ray Rice in the second round. The other players on the team, you look at Haloti Ngata, a former first-round pick. Michael Orr, your right tackle, a former first-round pick. But some mid-round selections like Osemele and Yanda playing the guard position. They were, Osemele, second-round pick. Yanda, former third-round pick. You look at Bernard Pierce, who contributed some, especially in the playoffs. Rice's backup. He was a third-round pick in this past year's draft. Getting a guy like Torrey Smith in the second round of the draft. Terrell Suggs was a first-round pick from back in 2003. It goes on and on and on. Paul Kruger, all of these guys. So many of them have been drafted by that organization. And some very high, and others have been found throughout the draft. That's why that organization always seems to be in the mix year in and year out. And the best way I can sum up this 2013 draft for the Baltimore Ravens is it was a typical Ozzie Newsome draft, and that's not a bad thing by any means. You got a very good player like Matt Elam to fall to you at pick 32. Fills the need. Very good value. One of the best players on the board at that time. Getting Arthur Brown in the second round, I think, was huge. Arguably best player available on the board and filled a big position of need with Ray Lewis retiring. You might have had Ray Lewis retire, but it looks like you might have found his replacement in the middle for the next 12 or 13 seasons, and I mean that. I really like Arthur Brown. Even getting a guy like Brandon Williams, the defensive tackle from a small school in the third round. This is a guy who could potentially come in and play nose tackle and be an upgrade over Terrence Cody. Just a typical Ozzie Newsome draft. And you're going to have somebody maybe like a John Simon in the fourth round that ends up being a contributor on the outside in sub packages. This was a very good draft. Getting guys that fill positions of need, but you don't reach for them. You find really good values. That's why the Baltimore Ravens always seem to be in the mix year in and year out. Ozzie Smith is a genius when it comes to the NFL draft, in large part because he follows that KISS philosophy of keep it simple, stupid. And it's amazing when you keep it simple, stupid, how intelligent you look. I gave the Baltimore Ravens for this draft a nice solid B, because, by God, they deserve it. Another good draft for that front office. Another organization in the AFC North that just flat out gets it is really surprising, and I almost feel funny kind of saying it. For years, this team didn't get it when it came to on-the-field matters, off-the-field matters, the draft, nothing. It used to be called the Bungles for a reason. But now the Cincinnati Bengals are a very good organization. They really are. Like I said, it feels funny saying that. The front office has finally started to understand how the draft works. They're on a good run in terms of evaluating talent, finding good values with picks. This is a team whose needle is definitely pointing up, and I do believe is a dark horse contender to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl this upcoming season. The Cincinnati Bengals, imagine that. When you look at this draft, I really love the pick of Tyler Eifert in the first round of pick 21. Bottom line is, they felt he was the best player available on the board at the time. I don't necessarily disagree with them. You say, well, you already have Gresham, another former first-round pick at tight end. Why can't you have two? Look at the Patriots with Gronkowski and Hernandez. Who says you can't have two tight ends? And by God, you've got a young quarterback in Andy Dalton that needs more weapons on the offensive side of the football. You just gave him Another big target. One that causes mismatches, that can line up on the outside, that can go over the middle. It can be a threat in the red zone. Andy Dalton's got to be a very happy man. And they were very, very smart for sticking true to their board and just taking the best value. You know, I could sit there and say their second-round pick, Bernard, maybe he was the best running back on the board, maybe not. Me personally, I wouldn't have taken him at pick number 37, excuse me. That's just me. However, he does bring a speed element, a change of pace element to the law firm of Benjarvis Green Ellis. Again, you're surrounding Andy Dalton with more weapons, putting him in the best possible situation to succeed. I like the value pick of Margus Hunt late in the second round. The kid from Estonia, sure, he's 26, but you look at that physical tool set, you can't coach that. Some players just have it, and others don't, and Margus Hunt has it. He's a guy that you could potentially line up on the outside at defensive end. You can put him in maybe at defensive tackle and pass rush situation. He's a guy that could potentially contribute. I really like the way the Bengals approached this draft. They found good players at positions of needs where they didn't really reach too much for anyone. Kudos to the Bengals. It's an organization whose needle is really pointing up. I thought they could have maybe done a little bit better in the middle rounds, but I'm kind of nitpicking there. I still gave them a solid B- grade, and considering we're talking about the Bengals, when years ago you would have never thought you would have heard B- and the grade for a Bengals draft in the same sentence, but it was. Marvin Lewis and that organization are doing a lot of good things, and they could be very scary in 2013 and beyond. The organization that doesn't get it in the AFC North to me is clearly the Cleveland Browns. No matter who's in charge, they do the same dumb shit. And yet in a couple of years, wonder why they're in the same dumb dick position because of the dumb shit they did. Michael Lombardi, hats off to you on your first draft. It wasn't very good. And why wasn't it very good? There were several reasons for that. First off, this team did not have a second-round pick. The reason for that was they burned it in the supplemental draft last year to get Josh Gordon. To be fair, if Josh Gordon was in this draft, if you would have got him in the second round, it would have been a tremendous steal. So that's actually a positive. It's something the old regime in Cleveland did right. But you hire Chudzinski from Carolina. He's an offensive coach. Yes, you drafted several players on offense last year. Between the Brandon Weedens, the Trent Richardsons, the Mitchell Schwartzes, the Josh Gordons in the supplemental draft in the second round, you added plenty of pieces on offense. There's still a lot of questions about Brandon Weeden, whether or not he's going to be a franchise quarterback. But the bottom line is, you added those pieces, and your offense still sucked. Sucked. Period. That offense stinks in Cleveland. And you bring in an offensive-minded coach. So like a good organization, you play to that new coach's strengths, you build around your quarterback, and really beef up your offense, right? Not if you're the Cleveland Browns, and apparently not if you're Michael Lombardi. You decide, hey, we gave big money to Paul Kruger in free agency, so let's draft Barcavius Mingo number 6 overall. So we add another pass rusher for our 3-4 defense, even though offense was the bigger need area. We take a guy in Mingo who arguably is not even the best 3-4 outside linebacker in this draft with the 6th overall pick. For a team whose offense stunk, and a team who brought in an offensive-minded head coach, 4 of your 5 picks in this draft were defensive players. Just makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. Now, on the positive note, Lombardi, with some moving around, some wheeling dealing in this draft, did get a 3rd and 4th round selection for next year. And ultimately, this team, if it's ever going to have any shot at being relevant, at being a playoff contender, they're going to have to be built through the draft. And maybe Michael Lombardi's goal was to start really building this team in the 2014 draft and beyond. Because to me, in my opinion, the Browns did a very poor job in this year's draft, which is no great surprise, which is why they were picking 6th overall and will probably be picking in the top 5 of next year's NFL draft. I gave them a D+, and to me, they merited every fucking bit of it. Period. So after talking about that organization in the AFC North that doesn't get it in the Cleveland Browns, I transition back to another organization that to me clearly does. I felt heading into this year's draft the Steelers had 4 major needs, and you could prioritize them depending on what you feel was most important. I feel they had to address outside linebacker, wide receiver, running back, and secondary. Safety or corner, didn't matter, just at least address one of those positions. Those are their 4 major needs, in my opinion. And the Steelers found a way in each of the first 4 rounds to address one of those needs and get really good value at each of those picks. Getting a guy like Jarvis Jones at pick 17 is huge. It's just something that seems like it's destined to happen for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, Jarvis Jones does have some medical concerns with the stenosis in his neck, what have you, but he's a talent. He's not necessarily somebody you watch work out and say, oh my God, he was this 40 times shit. He's not the strongest guy in the world. But you pop in the tape, you see a football player. You see a really good football player. A guy that makes a tremendous amount of sense for the Steelers in their 3-4 defense on the other side of Lamar Woodley. He really does. You know, so Jarvis Jones at pick 17, a typical Steelers pick. Great value, fell right into their lap. And you look at the second round, Le'Veon Bell. You could argue at that point in time whether they should have taken an Eddie Lacy or a Monte Ball or Jonathan Franklin even maybe. But the bottom line is they took a guy in Le'Veon Bell that fits into the type of Pittsburgh Steeler mold of a running back that they like as an organization. Now, this is an organization that has how many Super Bowl rings? Now, it's hard to argue with them. They know what the hell they're doing. Getting Marcus Wheaton, wide receiver in the 3rd round from Oregon State. And this is a kid at some point in time is going to be a starter for them. I firmly believe that. And getting him in the 3rd round, again, tremendous value. Kind of fell right into their lap. And Shamarko Thomas, a safety in the 4th round. Another guy who I think is going to be a starter at some point in time for them. Maybe eventually become Troy Polamalu's replacement. So you're looking at a draft where a team was able to sit tight, didn't really have to move up or down the board at all, and they found 4 players that were pretty good values at their 4 biggest positions of need. That's what the Pittsburgh Steelers do. And that's why the Pittsburgh Steelers, for many, many years now, have been, always in the mix. Some years more than others, but they never seem to really fall too far out of the picture. It's because of draft success like this. They hit on their first rounders, and then they find 1 or 2 other guys that fell to them that they end up being able to plug in and make players out of. A solid B draft for the Steelers. Not much to complain about, in my opinion, if you're a Steeler fan. There really isn't. Be thankful. You could be a fan of the Cleveland Browns. Then you should be pulling your hair out with this draft that they have. So let me know down below what you think about the performances of the teams in the AFC North in this 2013 NFL Draft. Next video, I will take a look at how the teams in the AFC South did.